I never thought. I gripped Calvin's hand tighter as we stepped off the Maplewood train platform, the rails still humming behind us from the 743 to Penn. He was only 10, but his words hit me like he'd been holding them in his chest for 100 years. "Mom," he whispered, eyes scanning the crowd like a soldier on lookout. "We can't go home. I heard Dad say he's getting rid of us." That's when Marcus drove off. He didn't even glance back to see we hadn't followed. His silver Altima, the one I'd co-signed for, disappeared past the Duncan and onto Springfield Avenue like everything was normal. Like he wasn't about to unravel our lives, thread by thread. I didn't speak. I couldn't. My mouth dried up, and a sick heat crawled across my scalp. I knelt on the platform, heart racing, and unlocked Calvin's phone. The voice memo app was still open. A timestamp read 1:13 a.m., and I hit play. He said he'll be free tomorrow. Said, "By Thursday morning I'll be done with all this." Then he laughed. I staggered back onto my heels, cold even in the October morning air. I'd heard Marcus laugh that way before, low and private. That was his lie laugh. That was his plotting laugh. I checked our shared checking account. At 6:02 a.m., $4,200 had been withdrawn in cash from the Bank of America ATM on Valley Street. I hadn't been asleep an hour before he'd drained it. Still crouched, I texted Dee, "Can you see if Marcus comes back to the house? Just watch from your window. Don't talk to him." My fingers trembled as I typed. Not from cold. From knowing I didn't know the man I'd just kissed goodbye at breakfast. He hadn't said he loved me. He'd just touched the back of my neck and said, "You don't need to worry about a thing, Trice." He said it like a lullaby. I clutched Calvin's hand again and stood. "We're gonna get a donut. And then I'm calling Pastor Willis. Not to ask for advice. Just for a place to sit while I figured out how to keep us alive." We found a corner booth at the Duncan on Springfield Avenue. Orange seats, sticky tabletop, and that familiar hum of machines pressing out coffee for people who still trusted their mornings. I stirred 2 creams into my cup and watched the swirl disappear. Calvin, across from me, was pretending to be interested in the sprinkles on his donut, but his leg bounced under the table like it belonged to someone twice his age. "Just eat, baby," I said softly. He nodded without looking up. I reached into my wallet and pulled out the laminated drawing Calvin made in 1st grade. Me as a post office superhero, cape and all. In the picture, I'm flying over Maplewood with envelopes trailing behind me like ribbons. I kept that little square of paper next to a photo of us at Liberty Hall last spring. Marcus had taken it. Said he liked seeing us framed by something historical. I thought that was romantic once. Now it felt like the only thing real in our marriage was that photo. The image of me and my son, smiling against history, unaware of what was plotting behind the lens. I'm Patrice Young, 56. Retired USPS supervisor after 31 years of straight routes, winter storms, missed holidays, and government paperwork. I know systems. I know signs. I know when something doesn't add up, and yet I missed this. Marcus played the long game. Cooked Sunday breakfasts, quoted scripture at just the right times, called me Trice like it was a private song. The outside world would say we were solid. That's how good he was. Behind closed doors, he didn't raise his voice, didn't hit, not once, but he wore down the corners of things, my confidence, my time, my choices. I sipped the rest of my coffee, opened my phone, and called Pastor Willis. The line rang twice. "Trice," he said, his voice already wrapped in concern. "What's going on?" "I need prayer," I said. "And I might need a safe room, just for a day. You and Calvin come by anytime." I closed my eyes for a second. Still numb, but at least I was composed. I knew who I was. Now I had to remember what I was capable of. 2 weeks ago, everything still looked whole. Our house on Ridgewood Avenue sat quiet in the mornings, warmed by the smell of cinnamon oatmeal and the distant hum of the town waking up. The leaves had just started to turn, that soft rustle of gold brushing the sidewalk. Marcus liked to walk with me before work, said it kept him centered. We'd loop past Memorial Park, sip thermoses of coffee, talk about everything and nothing. I used to think those walks meant something. Back then, Calvin was still packing his own lunch, humming under his breath as he zipped his Spider-Man backpack. Marcus had just started calling himself a consultant, though I never saw any contracts or emails. He was always headed to these vague business lunches, ones that never had receipts or names. I remember one Thursday in particular. He left in a rush, tie knotted tight, said he had to meet someone downtown. I found his lunch untouched in the fridge that evening. When I asked how the meeting went, he gave me a story so smooth it slipped right off the plate, something about a startup app and a possible investor. His eyes didn't match his words. I started to notice other small things. The calendar pinned on our kitchen wall suddenly filled with scrawled appointments in his handwriting. Names I didn't recognize, times that shifted daily. It looked busy, impressive even, but the pattern felt off. Too much movement for someone who never brought home a check. That weekend, while paying bills, I noticed something in the bank statements. Transfers to an account labeled MJH Services LLC. The payments weren't huge, $220 here, $390 there, but regular, almost weekly, and always followed by cash withdrawals. I called True Secure Credit Union on Monday and asked a friend in fraud prevention to flag the account for me, quietly. No formal report yet, just eyes. She said it looked like a shell setup. No real operations, just money going in and vanishing. Back then, I still cooked dinner at 6, still folded his socks, still saved the last peach cobbler slice for him. Sentimental? Yes. But that's the thing about love. It can be real and foolish at the same time. There's a photo wall in our living room, 12 frames wide, 4 tall, holding what I used to call the story of us. It's where I'd pause when dusting on Saturdays, tracing each memory with my fingertips. Calvin's baby pictures sit high, his first steps in a blue onesie, that Easter morning with chocolate on his chin, and then there's the second row where Marcus starts to appear. We met in 1994, a year after Charles, my first husband, passed. I was still carrying my grief like a second spine, rigid, invisible, always aching. Marcus walked into my life not like a storm, but like someone who knew how to listen. We met at the community center during a volunteer drive. He was setting up folding chairs. I was handing out flyers. He said I looked tired. I told him I wasn't interested. He kept showing up anyway. He didn't push. He brought coffee. Asked about Calvin. Offered to fix the screen door that had been squeaking since Charles got sick. My son was barely 4, and Marcus never overstepped. Just small, consistent kindnesses that stacked up until I let myself believe I could love again. By the time we married in 2009, under the arch of fall mums at Ebenezer AME, with Pastor Willis presiding, I was all in. Calvin was 15, and it was Marcus who filed the paperwork to adopt him formally, saying, "No child of yours will ever feel second." I believed that. I let myself believe that. The marriage certificate and Calvin's adoption decree are both in the fireproof box under our bed. I'd held on to them like anchors, symbols of a life rebuilt. In 2019, after years of stability, I added Marcus to the house title. I thought it was the right thing, a way to show trust. It wasn't impulsive. It was deliberate, born of a belief that we were on the same team. Looking at the photos now, our wedding day, Calvin in his suit jacket too big for him, I feel something unfamiliar. Not hatred, not even anger, just the quiet ache of betrayal that comes only from someone you handed the map to your heart. That evening, after Calvin fell asleep on the church cot, I drove home alone. The house at 32 Ridgewood looked smaller than I remembered, as if the walls had shrunk to fit the truth. I went straight to the home office, our so-called command center. The room smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and printer ink, the scent of years I can't get back. I opened the bottom drawer of the desk, the one where I kept the folders Marcus never bothered with. He said paperwork made his head hurt, so I'd always handled it. Bank ledgers, invoices, wire confirmations, my quiet archive of devotion. The first file I pulled was from 2016, $5,600 to Maple Recovery Center, Marcus's second rehab stint. He had promised that would be the last time, swearing he'd repay me when his business took off. I had even driven him there myself, sat in the car afterward, and prayed until my knuckles went white. Next was the truck loan, $12,000, notarized at the post office where I used to supervise. He said it was for his new delivery route. I'd signed the papers, convinced that helping him stand meant our marriage might finally balance. Then came the last one, dated June 2019, a transfer of $8,000 labeled Startup Capital. He'd claimed a friend had a lead on a courier contract in Newark, and that he just needed seed money. I wired it from my savings. Wells Fargo had even called to verify the transfer because it seemed unusual for my account. I'd laughed then, told the teller it was fine, that my husband was finally getting his break. In the neat columns of my handwriting, the total stared back at me, $25,600. Money meant for my retirement, for Calvin's future, for breathing room, after decades of federal work. Instead, it had vanished into Marcus's projects, each one evaporating like steam. He never said thank you. He just nodded, like a man approving a service he'd already paid for. I gathered the documents into a single folder and clipped them together. Ledger of care. I wrote across the top, if he could turn love into transactions, then so could I. Only mine would have receipts. The garage was always his space. I respected that. He had his tool bench, his black and yellow bins stacked by category, and an old portable radio that stayed tuned to 101.5 FM no matter what. I used to bring him lemonade in the summer while he tinkered, mostly with things that didn't need fixing. But on August 10th, I stood outside the side door, holding my arms full of groceries and couldn't get in. The key I'd used for a decade no longer worked. I remember blinking at the lock, then trying it again, like maybe I'd forgotten which way to turn. When I asked Marcus about it that evening, he said, "Oh, I meant to tell you. I lost the garage keys last week, had to get the whole thing replaced." He said it like he was telling me we ran out of milk. His tone didn't match the action. No apology, no mention of calling me while I was out. I nodded slowly, trying to convince myself it was just a careless mistake. But that night, I found the old lock tossed in the trash bin out back, perfectly intact. I pulled the Home Depot receipt from the junk drawer. $179, charged to my store credit card at 9:43 a.m. that same morning. That's when the unease planted itself in my chest. Not panic yet, but a steady throb of doubt. Dee, my next-door neighbor, mentioned something offhand the next day while we were bringing in trash bins. "Didn't know you were getting the locks changed. I saw the locksmith truck pull out just before noon." She squinted at me. "Everything okay?" I lied and told her yes, that Marcus had just been proactive. But something shifted in me after that. I started watching patterns. Who had access? Who made decisions without asking? Up until then, I'd been the one to handle the house. Appointments, maintenance, bills. We'd agreed early on. I was better with numbers, with keeping track. He was better with charm. But charm doesn't explain secrecy. Charm doesn't replace a conversation about why you're locking your wife out of her own garage. That day, I didn't say anything else. I shelved the receipt and the memory like a file I knew I'd have to pull again later. It was the first time I felt excluded, not as a slip, but as a choice. It was Calvin who heard it. He came to me late, barefoot, eyes wide, and voice low, the way kids speak when they know something has shifted but don't yet have the language to name the weight of it. "I think Dad's planning something, Mom," he said, and I turned from the laundry pile in our hallway, still holding a pair of mismatched socks. He pulled me toward the back stairwell, the one just outside his room, the narrow landing where sound travels up from the kitchen if you sit quietly enough. "I was here when he was on the phone," he whispered. "He said, she'll be out by next week, one way or another." The words hit me like a stone dropped in still water. The first ripples were disbelief. Then came the heat, the kind that rises in your throat when a hidden truth breaks the surface. I wanted to ask Calvin if he was sure, if maybe he misunderstood, but the look on his face didn't leave room for doubt. He had drawn a diagram in the corner of his homework notebook, a rough sketch of the stairwell, himself crouched behind the coat hooks, a red X where Marcus stood. Children notice everything. especially the things adults hope stay unseen. The next day, while sorting recycling, I found a piece of legal paper half shredded in the bin beside Marcus's desk. I eased it out gently, careful not to tear what was still intact. It was a blank quitclaim deed template, the kind used to transfer property ownership with a single signature. Mine was missing, but I knew what it meant. He was preparing something. He had already named a future that didn't include me. That afternoon, I sent an email to Norma Diaz, a lawyer I'd met years ago at a housing rights seminar. I didn't lay everything out, just enough. Norma, I wrote, I think my husband is preparing to move against me, financially. I need to understand what my rights are. Quietly, for now. I signed it. Patrice Young. Maplewood, NJ, Confidential. I didn't cry that night. I just stood in the stairwell with Calvin's drawing in hand and realized we weren't safe anymore. Not even inside our own home. I didn't even know Marcus had gone to the insurance office until the letter came. A plain white envelope from State Farm slid through our mail slot, addressed to him, not me. I wouldn't have opened it. 30 years with the federal government had drilled habits of respect and order into my bones, but my name wasn't on the envelope, and that struck me as strange. I unfolded the paper inside and stared at the header. Policy change confirmation. In bold, it listed a new primary policyholder, Marcus Young. My name had been removed entirely. At first, I reread it 3 times, thinking maybe it was a clerical error. We'd set up our homeowner's insurance together in 2011 when we refinanced to bring the rate down. We'd sat at the kitchen table with printouts and calculators, figuring it all down to the penny. So why would my name vanish in 2024? He came in as I was still holding the letter. I held it up. Did you go to State Farm without telling me? He barely looked at it. Yeah, I updated the policy. It's just simpler this way. One name, one point of contact. Mine was the one on there first, I said, voice low. He shrugged, like it was a formality. It's not a big deal, Trice, just for convenience. But I knew better. I heard the tone beneath the words. The way people talk when they're gently closing a door you didn't even realize they'd opened. That afternoon, I called Erica, the woman at the Maplewood branch office. She remembered me from a community outreach event. I faxed you the update form, she said after a brief pause. It was signed last Friday, in person. Her voice softened. Is everything okay? No, I said plainly. But thank you for your help. Back at my desk, I checked the auto pay. Sure enough, the monthly premium was now routed through Marcus's debit card, not the joint account, not even the one we used for bills. A separate card I'd never seen. That night, I didn't bring it up again. Instead, I took a photo of the policy change, backed up our important files, and renamed the folder House Defense Phase 1. If he wanted to move in silence, I could too. But I'd be moving smarter. On October 1st, I confronted him. Not with shouting or accusations. I knew better than to tip my hand that way. I waited until we were both in the bedroom, the lamp casting soft shadows across the dresser, the evening news murmuring faintly from the other room. Calvin was asleep. It was just us, and the silence between us had begun to grow its own language. I sat on the edge of the bed, the policy letter in my hand, the half-shredded deed template tucked beneath. Marcus, I said carefully, why are you changing documents behind my back? He didn't answer right away, just stood there by the closet, then turned slowly like he'd been rehearsing the next part. His face crumpled, not with guilt, but with something more manipulative. His eyes welled with tears. He walked over and sat beside me, reached for my hand. I knew this would happen, he whispered. You've been so distant lately, Trice. Ever since menopause hit, you've been suspicious of everything. The slap didn't come from my hand. It came from his words, like I was a hysterical woman, hormonal and confused. It would have been easier if he'd yelled. Instead, he pulled me into a hug, his breath steady, his voice trembling just enough to seem sincere. I've been planning a surprise for us. A getaway. You've been working so hard, I thought I'd handle the details. I said nothing. Just let him hold me, the way you let someone finish a lie they need to believe in, more than you ever could. Later, after he fell asleep, I went into the office and opened his laptop. I had memorized his password long ago. He thought he'd changed it, but hadn't. The browser was still open. Travel packages to Cancun. One way. Departure set for October 4th. 2. Adults. I checked our joint Amex account. A $1,600 charge from a resort booking platform sat right there, filed under wellness. No mention of me. I forwarded the email confirmation to myself and texted Norma. It's worse than I thought. He wanted me gone. But the part he miscalculated was thinking I'd fall for pity one more time. We didn't go back in. Not after that night. I packed 2 small bags while Marcus snored down the hall, his breathing thick, like he was dreaming sweetly of escape. I gathered only what mattered: our birth certificates, my passport, Calvin's school records, and the flash drive labeled House Defense. Everything else could burn. I slid the garage clicker into my coat pocket and left the house through the side door, locking it behind me for the last time. We slept in the car. Calvin curled in the back seat beneath his Spider-Man blanket, using his backpack as a pillow. I stayed in the driver's seat, wide awake under the yellow glow of the Ebenezer AME church parking lot lamps. The dashboard clock ticked past midnight. My body was still, but my mind had never been sharper. At 11:37 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was Marcus. Where are you? Then, on the next line, that single emoji, smug and knowing, was what did it. Not the Cancun reservation. Not the forged policy change. Not the shredded deed. That wink was the part that cracked something clean in me. I took a screenshot of the thread, saved it in the House Defense folder, then opened our online banking app and initiated a full lockout. I changed every password, disabled the shared login, and removed his access privileges. It took exactly 6 minutes, including security verification. When I was done, a message popped up. Unauthorized login attempt from MarcusYoung78 at Gmail. Access denied. I watched the blinking cursor in the app log like it was a heartbeat I finally had control over. At 12:18 a.m., I knocked on the side entrance of the church. Pastor Willis answered in sweats and a robe, his eyes kind but alert. He took one look at my face, then reached past the door and pulled Calvin gently inside. You're safe here, he said. Whatever this is, we've got room and time to figure it out. I exhaled fully for the first time in weeks. I wasn't looking for safety anymore. I was securing the field before the storm. By morning, my hands had stopped shaking. I waited until the clock hit 10 a.m., then drove to the Bank of America branch on South Orange Avenue. Not the one Marcus preferred, not the one nearest the house. I wanted fresh eyes, people who didn't know our routine. The teller was a woman named Kim, maybe in her 30s, her nails painted a soft coral. She greeted me with a smile that felt human. How can I help you today? I handed over my ID and leaned in slightly. I need to close a joint account. And I need to move the funds. Today. She raised her eyebrows but didn't flinch. Joint account access? Revoked. I already changed the login and reset the security questions. I just need the rest locked down formally. She led me to a small side desk and opened her terminal. I watched the screen flicker as she pulled up the account, her brows furrowed. There have been 3 failed login attempts this morning from a Chrome browser. Username tried was Marcusy56. Block it permanently, I said. No phone resets, no email recovery, full lockout. I want confirmation printed and signed. Kim nodded. You got it. $7,420. That was the amount sitting in our joint checking, the remnants of my pension and last month's carryover. I transferred it to a new solo account ending in 3,392, one I'd opened quietly 3 months back after the first odd withdrawal. At the time, it had felt like paranoia. Now, it felt like prophecy. Kim walked me through setting up alerts, PIN changes, and full biometric security. She even notarized a second set of documents to confirm my sole ownership. When it was done, she handed me a slim folder with the paperwork. I see women do this more often than you'd think, she said gently. It's never easy, but it's always smart. I nodded, gripping the folder like it was armor. For years, Marcus had worn calm like a second skin, weaponized his patience to keep me doubting. But the thing about silence, it can work both ways. Mine was over. His was beginning. The Maplewood Library scanner hummed like an old engine. Steady, patient, almost therapeutic. I sat at the corner workstation in the back, away from the windows, where the light softened against the bookshelves and no one asked questions. The flash drive marked House Defense clicked into the USB port like it knew its purpose. This wasn't paranoia anymore. This was protocol. I laid everything out on the table: the marriage certificate, the house deed with both our names, the loan confirmations I'd found from Marcus's past business ventures. All notarized, all untouched by him since he'd received the money. Most damning was the HELOC application I pulled from the online portal he hadn't logged out of. The request listed my signature, except it wasn't mine. I knew that forged version of my name, a childish curve on the P, a slant to the Y I hadn't written since my 20s. Marcus had gotten sloppy. I organized the files into labeled folders: assets, forgery, insurance changes, vacation proof, and threat log. Each document scanned crisp and clean, time-stamped, cataloged. It was the first time in months I felt in control of the narrative. Halfway through scanning, Marcus called. Again. This time, I answered, silent. Just let him talk. His voice swung like a pendulum, first soft and aching, like a man who'd just realized he lost something precious. Then bitter, the edge creeping in, accusing me of turning Calvin against him, of making him feel like a stranger in his own home. "I'm still your husband, Trice," he said. "We could fix this if you stop acting like this is war." It wasn't war. It was documentation. I clicked end call, saved the audio log, and added it to the folder labeled coercion attempts. Before I left, I emailed everything to Norma using a clean alias I'd set up. I typed a short message: full scan, please confirm safe receipt. Will await next legal steps. PY. The woman who had once believed that love meant trust was gone. This version of me knew that paper, when organized and time-stamped, was the only language systems respected. And now, I was fluent. The church meeting room smelled like lemon oil and old hymnals, clean, settled, dependable. The kind of space where truth didn't need to shout. Pastor Willis brought out a second folding chair for Calvin and poured him a cup of apple juice like this was just another Tuesday, not the start of our reordering. I laid the flash drive, the folder of notarized transfers, and printed screenshots on the table. Norma had replied to my email that morning. "This is enough. I'm filing the emergency motion. Stay off grid until Monday's hearing." I printed that too. Outside the stained glass windows, I spotted the gray Civic idling across the street. Dee had texted me 2 hours earlier. "He's circling. Parked facing your house, then mine. Now across from church." She'd even snapped a photo. Marcus, slouched in the driver's seat, sunglasses on, engine running. That same car he once begged me to co-sign for when his credit couldn't qualify a loan. I handed the picture to Pastor Willis. "He's watching us." The pastor didn't flinch. "We'll call it in. You don't need to explain. Just name what's true." I had already reported the forgery. Now, Norma was filing a temporary injunction on the deed, emergency freeze, pending a formal review. It wouldn't fix everything, but it would halt any sale or transfer until we faced him properly. She was also preparing the restraining order and putting me in touch with a victim advocate through the county. Step by step, the rope he tried to throw around me was unraveling. Then, the final piece: Child Protective Services. Pastor Willis had agreed. If Marcus approached Calvin or made any move to extract him, he would call CPS and document every moment. Not to take Calvin away from me, but to ensure Marcus couldn't twist anything legal into leverage. That room, with its dented chairs and flickering light bulb, became a war room. A sanctuary not just for faith but for facts. I wasn't scared anymore. Not exactly. But I was awake. Sharply. And for the first time in a long while, I had people who weren't just nodding at my pain. They were standing in it with me. By the time I left the church that evening, the streetlights were flickering on like cautious sentries. Calvin had fallen asleep in Pastor Willis's office chair, one sneaker half off, his breath slow and even. I didn't wake him. I let him rest there while I stepped into the hallway, closed the door behind me, and made the call I'd been preparing for all day. Marcus didn't pick up on the first ring. but he always answered by the third when he sensed I had something he wanted. His voice came through clipped, defensive. "What now, Trice?" I kept my tone even, measured. "We're meeting at True Secure Credit Union, Monday, 9:30 sharp." A beat of silence. "Why?" "There will be witnesses," I continued, "and documents. I'm not doing this in the house, not in the street, not over text. You say you want to work things out. Fine, bring your facts." He started to say something, probably another performance, another round of confusion and charm, but I cut the line before he got the chance. Then I saved the call log and forwarded the details to Norma and Pastor Willis. Minutes later, his first text came through. "You're ruining everything." Then another. "Why are you being like this? This is our house." And finally, "You think you're smart? Keep pushing." I took screenshots, printed them on the church printer, slid them into a folder labeled Threat Escalation. In Pastor Willis's office, I opened a clean yellow legal pad and wrote out the property division terms Norma had guided me through. No emotion, just numbers, percentages, facts. The portion I was offering him was fair, more than fair, considering the state of his contributions. It wasn't a surrender, it was a line in the sand. That night, after Calvin stirred awake and we returned to the guest suite, I sat on the edge of the cot, folder in my lap, watching him breathe. This wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about precedent. He needed to learn what happened when you underestimated the quiet woman who paid every bill on time, kept the receipts, and remembered everything. When I walked into True Secure Credit Union on Monday morning, I could already feel the tension pressing through the glass walls. The front desk clerk gave a small, uncertain smile, the kind reserved for scenes she couldn't quite interpret, but sensed weren't routine. I nodded and asked for Kim, the same teller who had helped me secure my solo account days earlier. Her eyebrows lifted when she saw me, but before I could explain, she motioned subtly toward the lobby. "He's already here," she murmured. Marcus stood by the notary window, sleeves rolled up like he was ready to get things done, a man on a mission. But it wasn't businesslike. It was desperation dressed as swagger. Next to him was a tall man in an off-brand suit, holding a briefcase too clean to have seen any courtrooms. I recognized the type, paper-deep authority. Kim leaned close. He asked for a rush notarization, said it was time-sensitive, tried to skip the queue. I stepped back, watching through the divider as Marcus handed over a packet of documents. Kim took them slowly, scanning the headers, then paused. Her eyes flicked up to mine, silently asking for confirmation. I gave a single nod. She turned back to Marcus. "I can't notarize this," she said flatly. "This signature doesn't match our records." His voice dropped, low and tight. "It's mine. I'm the owner. Just stamp the damn thing." I said no, Kim repeated. Then she signaled to the branch manager. I stepped forward. "Problem?" I asked, my voice calm, like I'd just arrived to handle paperwork, not watch a man sink in the mess he created. Marcus spun around, mouth parting as if to spin a narrative on demand. But he froze when he saw my folder, thick with dividers, labels, and color-coded tabs. His so-called lawyer raised a hand, like he might intervene. But the manager appeared before he could speak, clipboard in hand. "We'll need to validate all claims before proceeding," she said. "Ms. Young, you're here to represent your interest?" I smiled gently. "No, I'm here to present the facts." The meeting room smelled faintly of ink and hand sanitizer, a small, glass-walled chamber that forced transparency, whether people wanted it or not. The branch manager, a short woman named Elena, closed the door behind us with the quiet finality of someone who'd seen too many schemes unravel on weekday mornings. She pulled out a voice recorder, pressed the red button, and announced the time, 9:33 a.m. I slid my black binder across the table, each tab neatly labeled financial abuse, forgery, communications, assets, and protective orders. Marcus had taken the seat across from me, but he was shifting now, leaning back too far like the chair could carry the weight of his performance. His lawyer sat beside him, still quiet, hands folded awkwardly, not a single legal pad in sight. I opened the first tab and pushed it toward Elena. This includes a full property title chain, a prenuptial agreement, a notarized revocation of joint ownership authority, and records of attempted forgery regarding a HELOC application in my name. Marcus scoffed. She's confused. None of that's accurate. I didn't answer him. I addressed the manager. I've included screen captures of bank withdrawals, changes to our homeowner's policy without my consent, unauthorized credit charges, and a PDF containing a voice memo from my child, recorded at 1:13 a.m. on October 3rd. Elena looked up. Is the child present today? I nodded. Calvin was sitting just outside the room with Pastor Willis, calm but alert. He'd seen enough in the last month to know when to stay quiet and when to show up. Norma sat beside me, silent but steady, reviewing each page as I laid it down. Her presence was more than legal. It was anchoring. She didn't argue or posture. She let the paper speak. I pulled the final tab forward. Trust lockbox. This folder confirms the transfer of title into a legal trust, effective last Friday, under the entity PY Family Protection LLC. Marcus opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Elena folded her hands. We'll proceed with validation now. Everything will be recorded. No documents will leave this room without verification. I sat back, calm and unshaken. The story was no longer his to tell. The temperature in the room didn't change, but something in the air thickened. Elena adjusted her glasses, cleared her throat, and turned to Norma. Please proceed with the key findings. Norma didn't hesitate. She opened the folder marked forgery and slid the HELOC application across the table. Here is a document submitted to New Jersey Home Lending. It includes Mrs. Young's forged signature. Note the handwriting discrepancies, particularly in the capital P and the descending stroke of the Y. She turned to Marcus. Would you like to offer an explanation before we submit this to the fraud unit? Marcus leaned forward, hands flat on the table. This is a setup. She's just bitter, trying to take everything. Norma didn't respond to him. She moved on. Next came the email trail. One-way tickets to Cancun, a fake LLC drawing money from their joint account, and screenshots of messages sent at odd hours. She read aloud the one with the winking emoji. She'll be out by next week, one way or another, she quoted next. Calvin's drawing of the stairwell printed on glossy photo paper beside it. Elena raised a brow. This was taken by your son? Yes, I answered. He overheard Marcus on the phone in our home. We've documented the time, location, and followed all mandatory reporting guidelines through CPS. Marcus stood suddenly, knocking his chair back. This is character assassination. You're ruining me over misunderstandings. No, I said, my voice low but firm. You're standing in a room full of your own decisions. Elena pressed the intercom. Please escort Mr. Young outside while we finalize documentation. We'll be filing a property freeze under fraud protection statutes. He hesitated at the door, lips curled like he wanted to throw something. Words, blame, maybe even a last-ditch apology. But he didn't. The guard waited silently. Finally, Marcus stormed out. Elena turned to me. Do you wish to proceed with full revocation of joint ownership and activate the trust structure? Yes, I said, signing where she pointed. The pen felt heavier than it should have, like it carried the weight of every ignored instinct, every silenced doubt. But when I lifted it, I felt something settle, something final. The house didn't feel like home yet, not exactly. It felt like a crime scene after the tape was cleared, like something sacred had been tampered with and was now being restored piece by deliberate piece. Every click of the drill was an undoing, a reversal of Marcus's quiet trespass. Inside, the furniture was just where we'd left it, but the silence had changed. Calvin wandered into the living room and pulled down the photo of us from Liberty Hall, the one Marcus had taken years ago. He dusted the frame gently and hung it back on the wall. Looks better now, he said, stepping back. And it did. At 6:40 p.m., Norma arrived with the final document, the newly filed deed, now held under the protective umbrella of PY Family Protection LLC. She placed a small key ring in my hand. 3 silver keys and 1 gold, cut fresh and labeled. He's officially been served, she said. Restraining order delivered an hour ago. If he comes within 100 feet of you or Calvin, it's a violation. We stood by the door for a moment, the dusk light catching in her briefcase clasp. I exhaled, not shakily, but fully, like my ribs could finally expand without resistance. That night, I reset every password, changed every PIN, updated every emergency contact. I sent Dee a copy of the protection order and asked her to call me if anything suspicious surfaced. I left Pastor Willis a thank you message and told him we'd be back Sunday. No drama, just gratitude. Later, as Calvin drifted off in his room, I stepped into mine and placed the new keys in my top drawer beside the binder. No gloating, just relief, just space.